Hello there viewers, and welcome to episode 32 of F1 Talk, and as promised I will be giving you my thoughts on at the halfway point of the season here in this particular edition. Now I do realise we've had 11 rounds out of the 20 we're going to have this season, but as there was 2 races in a week, I've decided to leave it until now to give you my half-term report, so to speak. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this particular episode. No news, no nothing like that. That'll be in the next edition. This one will be quite a long video, so I hope you're sitting comfortably. And if you are, let's begin. I will be doing my thoughts and opinions on the teams, then drivers. So in other words, it'll be the team first, then the 2 drivers for that particular team, and I will be doing them in car number order. So in other words, I'll be doing the Marussias and the 3 newer teams last, as they are the highest numbers. So to begin, I will talk about Red Bull Racing. Now, by anyone's standards, anything less than perfection would be disappointing for the Red Bull Racing team, because over the last 2 seasons they have been absolutely dominating, especially with their double world champion Sebastian Vettel, who I will get to talk about in a few moments' time. But Red Bull, they still have the best designer in Formula 1. He sees Adrian Newey. He sees things that other people don't see. It's as if he sees air. He obviously doesn't, but he really does know what he's doing, this guy. Christian Horner, the team principal, is one of the calmest figures in Formula 1. And as a result, he passes on that calmness and coolness to the rest of his team. Red Bull went into the season as hot favourites, as you'd expect they would be after the 2 previous seasons. You could quite obviously say that the whole of the Formula 1 world, myself included, people that watch Formula 1 and have done for years and years and years, were hoping for, them to be challenged this year, and they certainly have been challenged this year. They have won, they haven't won as many races, they're not as dominant as they have been, yet I still believe they have the best car in Formula 1, even though the season's been a darn sight closer. Red Bull, due to bad luck or whatever, have not won the races that they should have won. And those races have gone to other drivers and other teams. What I will say for Red Bull as a whole this season so far, because that's basically what this video is, it's a so far video. This year, Red Bull have had a few, bad races. The odd retirement here or there, but not as much as other drivers. I'll get onto that later on. But you have to say that, compared to the 2 previous seasons, it's nowhere near as good. So for that, I give the Red Bull team, and I will come back to my grading in a moment for Red Bull. They have been criticised just lately for stretching the limit and the boundaries of the rules because of the engine mapping incident a few races ago, because of the flexible front wings of last season and things like that. They really do push the limits and boundaries of the rules that they're allowed to do. They bend them, but they don't break them. And that's basically what Formula 1 is all about. It's who can interpret the rule changes from end of season to beginning of season the best. It's also about, having the fastest car, engine, chassis package, and obviously driver talent. And Red Bull They do have one of the best drivers in the world in Sebastian Vettel. They have one of the most consistent drivers in Mark Webber. And like I say, I will get on to drivers after individual teams. As for my grading for the Red Bull team in general, you have to look at the last 2 seasons, as I keep on saying, and I will give them a B+. Onto their drivers now, and obviously we begin with the reigning double world champion Sebastian Vettel of Germany. And quite frankly, he's, in my long-term fans' opinion, he's cracking under pressure. Finally, he's not had the best car at the start of the season. He's not, gone out and taken every pole position of the season like he did last year. He's blaming others for his misfortunes, specifically recently when being passed by Lewis Hamilton. When Lewis was trying to unlap himself, he blamed Hamilton for not being able to compete for the win. He's blamed Lorraine Carther-Cahan of HRT for not paying attention in the background. I seem to remember that was at the Malaysian Grand Prix, which was the second race of the season. Vettel's won 1 race this year. He would have won the Valencia Street Circuit Grand Prix, the European Grand Prix, had it not been for the failure he had. He is close to the top of the championship because he is at present the most consistent driver in Formula 1. He's not winning races, but he's doing enough to stay in the championship hunt. But there are signs of so-called wear and tear on Vettel at the moment. He's not the same driver he has been the last 2 seasons, or last season specifically. There's no way that he is going to be as dominant. Okay, we still have 9 races to go as I record this and post this video up, but we will see a more competitive Vettel in the second half of the season. I do believe the 3-week gap between the end of the last Grand Prix, Hungarian, and the next Grand Prix, will we see the return of the rampant and dominant Red Bull, specifically the rampant and dominant Sebastian Vettel? Only time will tell. But as for my grade for him, I will have to give Vettel, like Red Bull, I will have to give him, let's think about this now, I'll give him an A-, because he has been that consistent. I was thinking about giving him a B, but the mere fact that he's still up there in the championship hunt, the mere fact he's consistent over and over again, getting high points. His worst result, apart from the DNF, I think this year was a 6th or a 7th. So that's why he gets an A- in my personal opinion. On to his teammate from Australia, Mark Webber, who's been in Formula 1 now since 2002. At the very start of the season, he couldn't get out of 4th place. He got 4 4s. Now, most people would say that's 16, but not in this case, because the championship points on offer per race are slightly different. He's had 2 brilliant wins this year. It's probably the 2 biggest Grand Prix in the calendar. Monaco, every single driver of every single season wants to win Monaco. It's simple fact. Mark Webber is, quite frankly, at the moment, he's Mr. Monaco. He's won the race 2 out of the last 3 years. He loves the circuit. And the other race he won is the British Grand Prix this year with a brilliant strategy, brilliant passing on Alonso in the Ferrari. And, he has had the measure of his competitors in those particular races. He does like the British Grand Prix as well. But when Webber does not have the know-how to get the best out of the car at a particular track, he does fall behind. And as most number twos experience in the world of F1, I'm talking people like David Coulthard, Rubens Barrichello, Eddie Irvine to a lesser degree, you do see number twos have the majority of the car problems. For instance, he has had 2 very disappointing qualifying sessions so far this year. Like I keep saying, we're only just past halfway in the season. He's gone out in session 3 at least twice this year, as Mark. Been unlucky, as I keep saying. I do believe Mark Webber in the history of F1 has had more bad luck than anybody. And as Red Bull's number 2, he doesn't quite get everything that Sebastian Vettel does. I don't care what any team says. You look at David Coulthard in the McLaren years when he was number 2 to Mika Hakkinen. You look at Rubens Barrichello when he was number 2 to Michael Schumacher at Ferrari for 5 seasons. You just look at that and you know that a number 2 driver doesn't get the perks that a number 1 driver gets. It's obvious. You want your number 1 driver to have the best possible chance at winning a race, which means that the number 1 driver will get your upgrades, you will get your tested parts quicker than a number 2 driver. But Mark Webber had a failure on the KERS, or during qualifying one time, which meant he couldn't get out of the 3rd session. And that's the difference between having a good race and having a bad race. But those 2 brilliant victories, he's won more than Vettel this year, which is very impressive for him. He's also been just as consistent, if not slightly more consistent than Vettel, because of his position in the championship. He's like a couple of points ahead of Vettel, or 1 point ahead of Vettel. He's 2nd in the championship. He is more consistent than Vettel. However, Vettel seems to be getting more higher points finishes. Webber can score the odd 8th or the odd 10th, where Vettel would be getting a 6th or higher. So for that reason, he has won 2 races. Like Vettel, I will give Webber an A-. He is up there. His season is going really, really well. And, could he be this year's champion? As I keep saying, time is the answer to that question. On to the Vodafone McLaren Mercedes team. And the fruits of their labour this year produced easily the best looking car in Formula 1. The only car near as good in looks is the Lotus, but I'll come on to that later on. The best looking car in F1 turned out to be the fastest car in F1, especially in the first race or 2. A brilliant start to the season for Jenson Button. He won in Australia like he did in 2009. A great start for the team. The car was quick, off the mark, which is what they needed. McLaren have fallen behind in the last few seasons since the change of the aerodynamics, really. They changed the aerodynamics system in 2009, and you could see that the McLaren was nowhere near as fast as it had been the previous 2 or 3 seasons. The McLarens have tended to fall behind 09, 10 and 11. They needed to be right out of the blocks, and they were. They locked out the front row at round 2. I do believe they locked out the front row at round 1 as well, so things were looking good. Jenson Button with the victory in round 1, but then for Jenson it's gone downhill from there. He had a podium finish in China, I think it was, and it wasn't the best of times for Jenson. Lewis Hamilton, on the other hand, has been able to adapt to the positions that the team have managed to put him in. Conditions is the word that I meant to say there. The McLarens, more often than not, are held up by slower cars. I'm talking, Force Indias, Saubers, Williams. Williams have improved. I'll come back to that, as I keep saying, later on in this particular video. More often than not, they're held up or taken out of the race, or so they can't be as competitive as they could be. A lot of F1 critics say that McLaren have not been the same since Ron Dennis left. I have to wholeheartedly agree with that statement. There's no doubt about it in my mind that the championship winning days, as far as McLaren are concerned, are behind them at the moment. They have momentum on their side in the last couple of races where some big upgrades were added to the car. Button is more up there and competitive. Hamilton seems to be able to adapt his ability to anything that McLaren could throw at him car wise. So before the break, Hamilton won in Hungary. Can McLaren keep the competitiveness going? It's a question that the future will answer for us. As I keep saying, time will tell. I cannot stress enough that if Hamilton's going to win this championship, Button needs to be up there as well, taking points away from the rivals, because Jenson cannot win the championship. Speaking of McLaren's grade, considering the problems they've had since winning the first race, getting a couple of podiums, and winning the last time out, considering who they are, their past, and considering all that, I would have to give McLaren a B. As for Jenson Button, euphoria at the start of the season. It looked like it was going to be the continuation of his fairly decent season last year. Alright, Vettel dominated, but Jenson finished second in the championship. The car was looking good, both physically and metaphorically. They had won the first race of the season. They locked out pole position and second place on the grid in Malaysia. Had it not been for that rainstorm, the monsoon, they would have probably taken the 1-2 that weekend. The podium position for Jenson at China, and then a string of bad results. It was as if the Button of 2008 and 2007 have returned. It's quite obvious even to me that when Jenson is on form and the car is underneath him, he is very, very difficult to beat. Even the best in the world. And these guys, around him on the grid are the best in the world. I wouldn't say that your Charles Peaks are your best in the world or your Carter Cayans, but your drivers like your Kobayashis, your Perez's, your Grosjeans, your Raikkonens, your Schumachers, your Rosbergs, your Alonsos, even his teammate Hamilton, your Webbers and your Vettels. They are the best drivers in the world at what they do. They're quick thinking. They're quicker thinking than anybody else in the world. That's why they're the F1 drivers. They will find it very difficult to beat Jenson with a car that is 100% hooked up around the circuit by the team and by Jenson himself. He is very difficult to beat. But when things are not going his way, like they haven't so far this season, apart from 2 or 3 races. So for the majority of the season, he has been struggling to find a decent setup with the car. It's quite clear that he has been struggling with this year's Pirelli tyres, which seem to be giving out the cliff, so to speak, that we hear of all the time. The cliff is so fast, you could be doing a brilliant lap on tyres you've been on, say, 5 or 6 laps, and all of a sudden, the cliff has been reached and you're struggling for performance, you could lose, say, a couple of tenths a lap in terms of performance, and by the time you've realised it, you might have passed the pits and you've got to do another lap before you can change them again. Yes, he won in Australia. Yes, he got a podium position in China, and I think last time out or the time before. But he's not had the best of seasons. He's not going to finish runner-up in the championship this year due to bad luck, bad strategy, bad performance, or just not being able to read track temperatures or setups properly. So for Jenson Button, I've got to give him a C for his performance this year. Yes, he struggled, but any driver who's been world champion or any former world champion should be able to read the conditions, and he just hasn't this season. It's been disappointing for him. On to Lewis Hamilton now, and quite frankly, this season was make it or break it for Lewis, I think. Unlike Jenson, this is a man who has to win the World Championship again. Jenson said in the press, interviews, whatever, that he doesn't have to win the World Championship again. He's been there, he's done that. He is Britain's 10th World Champion. He doesn't have to worry about getting there again. For a driver of Lewis Hamilton's calibre, he has to do it again. Lewis is there at McLaren. He's been at McLaren since he was like 9 years old, getting mentored into the position, into the driver that he is today. McLaren is his team. He's been given a sort of birthright, so to speak. As I say, he's been there since he was 9 years of age. He will, depending on what happens the rest of the season, he will probably stay there his whole career. He has been a factor in McLaren since 2007. He came third in his first race, for heaven's sake. He is that good. And his talent this year to drag the car around, to get a couple of pole positions this year, has been, quite frankly, brilliant. I know I'm saying that a lot, but it's the truth. Hamilton with a wonderful win last time out in Hungary, although it is quite difficult to pass, so there is that part to it. He's been more careful this year, considering the amount of crashes he was involved in last year. That particular name has moved, particular stigma has moved on to another driver. I will talk about that in a future section of the video. But his qualifying performances have only sort of been matched by Vettel, if you think about it. You get the odd qualifying gem from Alonso in the Ferrari, you get the odd qualifying gem from Mark Webber, but more often than not it's Hamilton versus Vettel for pole position, and the rest of the field line up behind, basically. When Button has faltered, Lewis has been up there, although a couple of times this season it's been Lewis in 6th or worse, in qualifying and the race, really. So it's all due to the competitiveness of the car, as it is with all the drivers, but it's all to do with how competitive the car is, how they can manage the tyres, and like I say, that is true for all the drivers, but not as much as the McLaren drivers have to be on the ball, because maybe their tyres aren't worked as well as the other teams can. But Lewis has coped with the difference to the tyres this season a darn sight better than his teammate. He's, I think, 4th in the championship. He's not too far away, and for that reason alone I've got to give him a B+. On to the Scuderia Ferrari team, and F1's eldest team is still learning, as they all are, but Ferrari's problem right now is not to do with the learning curve of Formula One. It's to do with their strategy. They were worried at the start of the season that this was going to be yet another wasted championship campaign, that their man Fernando Alonso would not be competitive yet again, and in the first couple of races he wasn't. He got a couple of mid to late points finish positions in the first couple of races. He won in Malaysia, which was the second race of the season, but apart from that, it was in the rain, pouring rain. He managed his tyres brilliantly in a car that wasn't capable of winning races. It wasn't capable of high qualifying positions, never alone winning races, but the talent of Alonso has shone through this season so far. He is the championship leader, and if Felipe Massa has returned to the Massa that we knew in 2008, Ferrari would be leading the Constructors' Championship. As a result, Red Bull are, McLaren are second, and Ferrari are doing very well to stay ahead of Lotus, because they are being challenged from both sides of the Lotus camp. Massa is scoring the odd point here or there. His best result this year, I do believe, is a fourth. Alonso's won 3 races this year, the only driver to win more than 2, and if Ferrari can't win the Constructors, I'll say that now. We're only just under half of the season to go, so it's all about, just like Jenson Button for Massa, it's all about Massa taking points away from Alonso's rivals if he can. And Massa, out of the number 2s I've mentioned so far that are number 2s this season, because Red Bull do not have a bona fide number 1, they're 1 and 3 in the championship, or they're 2 and 3 in the championship of Red Bull, so they don't have a genuine number 2 yet. McLaren have a genuine number 2. This year it's Jenson Button. This year, since Alonso came into the team, Ferrari, Massa's been number 2, and he has been number 2 most of his career, apart from 2008. So, can Massa help Alonso to the championship? Who knows? But as Ferrari would probably give themselves a lowish mark, because Massa cannot help Alonso out as much as he'd like to. They have to help Felipe to help Alonso. Alonso's doing his bit, no doubt about it, with brilliant pole positions in wet weather conditions, fantastic racing. Alonso's not winning every race, and he's not getting on the podium every time, but he's getting high to mid points finishes every Grand Prix. And he's the most consistent driver. I know I've been saying like Vettel's most consistent, Webber's most consistent, but obviously the most consistent driver of the season wins the championship. And for squeezing what he can out of an uncompetitive car, Alonso has to be an A+. On to Felipe Massa from Brazil, and yet still, he is still not the driver he was in 2008. I've said that time and time again on these videos. It's as if he's scared to push the car. He's not, obviously. He's still a great driver, but he's not doing what Ferrari need him to do, and that is steal points away from the other big guns. Whether he can raise his game is another matter. I've been calling for Ferrari to replace Felipe Massa now for about a season and a half, because it was obvious that he wasn't good enough anymore. A flash of brilliance, I think it was at Canada, got him to 4th place, but apart from that he's done nothing. And there are calls for him in the Tifosi to be replaced. As for his replacement, Sebastian Vettel is penciled in for 2014, contract and thingies, all sorts of other things pending. Ferrari were interested in Button. Button said, I'm interested, but only if you want me for 2 seasons or more. And Ferrari will probably have a seat open for next season, 2013, but probably not for 2014. Can you imagine in 2014 Alonso and Vettel at Ferrari? That's going to be amazing if it happens. But Alonso is the bona fide number 1. Ferrari will be looking to either, retain Massa if they must for 2013. They will be looking for fresh blood, probably in the form of another driver, which I'll talk about further down the video. But as for Massa goes, it's just more of the same, really. He's not improved. Or if he had, there's been flashes of the 2008 Massa, but not to the degree of 2008. So, yet again, I'll have to give Massa a lowish score for a Ferrari driver, because he's just not doing what the team need him to do. And until he does, he will continue to get a lowish high-end score from me. So I will give Felipe Massa, like Jenson Button, a C. Onto the Mercedes GP team now, and this is a team that won the World and Constructors Championships in 2009 under a different guise as Brawn GP. Now the sad thing is that this is a team from Germany. The team name is German, the car is German, it's fully German. They are the second of 2 engine and car manufacturers, the other being Ferrari, of course. And for them to remain in the sport long term, they need brilliant results. I wouldn't say sooner than later, but they do need to be champions within the next 5 years. They were the last team to give us their car for this season. They wanted longer to test out components and, chassis and all sorts of things. And for the first few races at least, it looked like that was the right strategy to, employ. They were showing brilliant qualifying pace. They were like second row, third row on the grid, which is basically where they wanted to be. What Mercedes really wanted was their first win since becoming Mercedes, and that came at China for Nico Rosberg. And it was the highlight of the season for them so far, obviously, because we don't know the progress of the cars. We'll know it after the next Grand Prix. But Rosberg getting the win is in high contrast to the quite awful finishing record this year of Michael Schumacher. The 7-time champion is not doing at all well, and since the win for Rosberg, it's been a steady decline. They are, in terms of where they finished in the championship last year, they are the 4th team in Formula 1. In my opinion, they are the 5th, possibly even the 6th best team in F1 at the moment, as I speak. Lotus are easily better than them this year, even though Lotus don't have a win. I think the Saubers are better than the Mercedes. I think the car is better, put it that way. And as a result for Mercedes, yes, they've achieved their aim of getting a win, but they're not championship contenders in either championship. Rosberg is about 30 to 35 points behind Alonso, maybe even more than that behind Alonso, and a points deficit like that in these days of consistent finishes, in non-race ending incidents, in non-failures, so to speak, because we're seeing 20 plus cars finish most races, and the cars that don't finish are either Michael Schumacher and one of the three newer teams, and that's all we see. That's all we see in terms of failures. So for Mercedes, yes, they've got their first win. It was a great victory. It was a great weekend, all weekend for Nico Rosberg. But Schumacher's inability to score big points, even though he got a third at Valencia, even though that, it seemed to signify. And Schumacher, if not for a penalty, would have got the pole at Monaco. So it's difficult to grade them fairly because they've had the euphoria of the win, but they've also been down in the dumps in terms of reliability. So that being said, you take one away from the other, and I will give them a sort of roundish figure of a B- as a team. On to the 7-time world champion now, and we're beginning to see it's as if he's taken a couple of seasons to get used to the new rules, regulations and car setups, and quite frankly he was getting used to the tyres again. He hasn't raced on slick tyres in years in F1 as Michael Schumacher. Dare I say, he's beginning to return. We are beginning to see specks of the old master return. It's just that his car is not reliable enough. Hell, the DRS failed. The first DRS failure of any car. Not being able to close it, so he had to creep around the corners. Alright, he could go really fast down the straights. But this happened at Spain, I think it was, and he couldn't close his DRS. The first failure happened to Michael Schumacher. Out of the 11 races we've had, he's finished 3 or 4 of them, and that's not good enough for a driver of his calibre. It's not good enough for the team that wanted to be challenging for the championship this year. It's just simply not good enough. He's had a terrible season in terms of consistency and reliability. He got a third at Valencia, as I've just said, which, pleased the team high end. It was as if the team relished that result more than they did Rosberg's win, which was a few races before that. So, yes, he's got a podium position. Yes, as I say, if not for the 5th-place grid penalty at Monaco, he would have got pole, and it would have been interesting to see if he could have taken the race win from there. But apart from that, Schumacher's had a terrible season through basically no fault of his own. Yes, there has been that sort of anger in him when he gets past, or he won't let someone pass. But through no fault of his own, he's not had the best season. And it's nothing to do with him that he can't read the track temperature or the tyre degradation or the setup of the car. He's having the worst luck of any driver of the past few seasons. He's had 7 or 8 DNFs. And in this day and age, that's unheard of. So for Michael Schumacher, with the car plus his ability, minus the bad luck, I will have to give Schumacher, like the other 2 non-performers, a C. On to Nico Rosberg now, and you could tell that this was the season that he had to do something. He's been in Formula 1 now since 2006, and for 6 seasons in F1, it took Jenson Button 6 seasons, or 5.5 seasons to get his first win. This was 5 and a tiny little bit for Rosberg's first win. It was in round 3 of the championship in China. As I say, brilliant qualifying, brilliant race, brilliant strategy. It's Ross Brawn, for heaven's sake. Can't get a better strategist than Ross Brawn. But, after the highs of China and a couple of decent high-end points finishes, it's basically been more of the same. The car is So, like, if you looked at a line chart, you'd see it start off on a straight line, then peak, and then go down a tiny bit, and then just stay in a straight line for the rest of the season. Whether other teams have made upgrades, progress, and they've improved whatever, the specs, the tyre degradation or whatever, Mercedes just seem to be that long line of consistent performance, which is good in some respects, but in others it's not. Mercedes tend to be the first two cars in the pits if there's not been a racing incident. In other words, if someone's lost a front wing or punctured tyre or whatever, they tend to be the first cars in the pits, which means they are heavy on their tyres first thing in a Grand Prix. And in this day and age where there's no fuel stops, in other words, you're full of fuel first thing, it tends to hurt its tyres more than any other team. And it's hurting Rosberg's chances of winning Grand Prix, which is basically what Mercedes are going to aim for now, is improving that first stint in a race so that they're not the first team in the pits, so that they don't have to change the tyres first before anybody else, because it's hurting their chances of winning a race. That's all they can aim for now, is winning races or high-end points finishes. But for Rosberg, yes, he got his first win. Brilliant it was. You know, it was... At the time, Mercedes were doing really well in qualifying. They were like third, fourth every race. But as I say, a slow, long, consistent line, straight, consistent line in a bar chart, or a line graph, that would accurately describe their season after the sort of peak at the start of the season. For Rosberg, you've got to give him... I would give him a B+. He's doing what he can with the car, but he's not consistent enough. Onto the Lotus team, and finally, before the season started, or just at the end of last season, they finally sorted out the rights to use the name Lotus Rao with the team that entered Formula 1 in 2010. The owner of the now Caterham team finally decided to change the name to Caterham because he had bought the rights to the, he had bought the Caterham name, the brand, the factories, everything to do with Caterham. So the team that was known as Lotus are now known as Caterham, and the team that was known as Lotus Renault are now Lotus F1, which is fair enough, all sorted, no problems. And for me, Lotus, apart from one other driver, has been the revelation of 2012. They started off with their intentions high because they signed Kimi Raikkonen, 2007 world champion, to drive their first car. And the much improved Romain Grosjean is their number 2 driver. This is a guy who raced for the team in 2009 after the departure of Nelson Piquet Jr. and he was useless basically, but more of that in a few moments. Their intentions are high. They are the best team not to have won a race this year. I think it's just a matter of time before they do win a race. They are consistently good. Raikkonen is more often than not on the podium, and if it wasn't for their bad first stints, I'm not saying that the car is bad or slow at all, but they seem to be brilliant with tyre management. They seem to be a lot better in the third stint of a race or fourth stint of a race, depending on how many tyre stops there are per race. They tend to be the best team in stint 3 of a race, the final stint of a race. That needs to be put back to the second stint and the first stint for them to reach the checkered flag first. Of the 2 drivers that they have, it's difficult to know who's going to get the first win, if the first win's going to come this year. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that the first win for Lotus comes this season. Who's going to get it? Maybe the next round at Spa. Kimi Raikkonen loves Spa. He always has done. He's known as the king of Spa. And will he get Lotus's first win? Possibly, if they carry on the way they have been doing. For Lotus, as I say, been absolutely brilliant this year, and only just pipped to victories by Alonso or Vettel or Webber or whoever. So I will say for Lotus as a team, because both drivers have been consistently scoring decent points, they're more or less the only team to have both drivers scoring consistent points. Yes, you've got Red Bull, but you sort of expect that with the last couple of seasons. But Lotus, if you de-evolve the car, they won the championship in 2005, 2006. If you further de-evolve the car, they won the championship in 94, 95. But can you call that the same team? I personally don't, but I do understand the former guises of a team. And I'll talk about more about that when I reach the next team. As for the team, Lotus F1, they are pretty darn good. So as a team, I will give them an A-. They are that good. On to the Finnish world champion from 2007, Kimi Raikkonen. As I've said, he is more often than not getting consistent podium positions in each race. There's a couple of times where he finishes 14th or 8th or whatever, but more often than not, this guy's on the podium. He's enjoying his return to Formula 1. It's as if the pressure's off and he can just enjoy his racing. He wore a James Hunt helmet in one of the Grand Prix, and he basically is the James Hunt of the current F1. The only person that comes even remotely close to him is Jenson Button, and those days are long gone, I think, for Jenson. So in terms of talent, in terms of the fire, Raikkonen is back. It's the same Raikkonen we saw at McLaren. It's the same Raikkonen we saw at his first season in Ferrari. He has his best chance yet to win a race next time out. As I say, it's Spa. He loves Spa. It's his favourite track, as it is for a lot of the drivers. But the last time Raikkonen was in F1 and he drove at Spa, he won. 2009 in an uncompetitive car. This time he's got a competitive car. Can Lotus give him what he needs to take the checkered flag? We'll find out in a few days' time. But in terms of his performance this year, he's, I wouldn't say struggling to keep his younger teammate behind him, because he's been just as good himself. But I will say that Raikkonen, for this season, is doing extremely well. The consistent points finishes. A few races ago, I tipped him to win the championship. Since then, he's faltered a tiny bit and doesn't look like he can win the title anymore. But we've still got 9 races to go. Anything can happen. We're talking from his teammate downwards, I would suggest, is the people that can't win the championship due to inconsistency or due to not being fast enough or whatever. But you have to say that Kimi is probably still an outside bet for the championship, but he's still not going to get it, I don't think. It's either going to be Alonso, Hamilton, Webber or Vettel. So we'll see. We'll see. But I will give Raikkonen, for the season he's had so far, a B+. He's been that good. On to his French teammate now, Romain Grosjean. And as I say, when he joined the Renault team in 2009, it just wasn't his time. He went to GP2 in 2010. and like many drivers, relearned what it was like to drive a fast racing car, and he's come back to Formula One this year, and he's been brilliant. Had luck gone his way, or more time in an F1 car, so like if he had a year's more experience, he probably would have won a couple of races by now. Very close, not coming together with his teammate last time out in Hungary, but he's more or less been consistently up there. Had the same failure as Vettel did in Valencia, and if not for that failure, he would have won that race. Just like Vettel, he would have won that same race if not for that failure. Alonso was beginning to struggle with the tyres, and he was coming up behind him. He was definitely quicker at that stage of the Grand Prix, and he had the failure, and that just destroyed him in terms of the race. So can he win a race this year? Again, it's a question that only the next 9 races can answer, but he's a darn sight better than he was in 2009. He's a different driver, he's a different person, he's more confident with the car, he's more confident in himself, I think, and it shows in the maturity of his driving. So what can you say about Romain Grosjean? Like Raikkonen, I've got to give him a B+. On to the Force India team now, and this is the team that has gone through the most changes in recent Formula One memory. They've been Force India since 2008, and I keep saying this word, but it's flashes of brilliance. Flashes. Not consistent brilliance like the top teams, flashes of brilliance. In 2007, they were Spiker. In 2006, they were Midland. In 2005 to 91, which is their beginnings, they were Jordan F1. And a team that goes through that many changes needs time to adapt. It needs time to get used to the new owners, the new sponsors, the new drivers and things like that. And, apart from a couple of brief moments of absolute brilliance, the pole position at Spa in 2009, the second place runner-up finished Raikkonen in 2009, and that was with a driver that hasn't been in Formula 1 a couple of seasons now, Giancarlo Fisichella. They got rid of Adrian Sutil, whether or not it was for Sutil's sort of like barroom antics of last season, whenever it was, I can't quite remember. It was alright in the world of Formula 1, but it was a barroom brawl, or barroom fisticuffs or whatever. And they got rid of Adrian Sutil, they made Paul di Resta team leader, they brought in Nico Hulkenberg, who got a pole position for Williams at Brazil in 2010. It seems to be working, but like I say, they show glimpses of what they could achieve partially, and more often than not they are the team that fail to deliver, and that's got to be heartbreaking for Vijay Mallya, the team principal and owner. It's got to be heartbreaking for the team, because they know on occasion they can be brilliant, they can be up there fighting for podium positions, but most of the time they're fighting for positions 8, 9 and 10 in a race. And these are two hungry young drivers. Paul di Resta wants to win races. He can't in this team. He is more often than not tipped to join Mercedes should Michael Schumacher leave. He could very well even replace Felipe Massa at Ferrari if he chooses to go that way. However, as I keep saying, the replacement for Felipe Massa, if it happens, next year will be a 1-year deal, due to the sort of like ajar door that Sebastian Vettel could walk through for 2014. But as for 2012, Force India just need to improve their performance a little bit. They're getting left behind by Lotus, quite obviously. Their fight is with, I think it's with Williams at the moment, which is quite an interesting battle in the midfield this year. the drivers are certainly good enough. Paul di Resta has raw talent. He's from the same driving fraternity, so to speak, as Dario Franchitti, the IndyCar champion. And we know how good he is. If you don't know how good he is, look him up on YouTube. That guy is brilliant. So, Paul di Resta, Nico Hulkenberg for the Force India team. The hunger is there, the desire is there, but the ability at the moment isn't quite up to scratch. And I say that through gritted teeth, because they should be, you know, for a team that's been in Formula 1 as long as they have, 2008, they should have got their first win by now. And is that harsh on my part? Possibly. You know, they can be occasionally brilliant, but more often than not, they fall short of the standard that is required for this sport. And don't forget, they're fighting teams that consistently get the top 10 points paying positions. You've got to expect the top 8 positions to be taken in a race by the Red Bulls, the McLarens, the Ferraris, possibly the Mercedes, but more often than not, the Lotuses will take those points paying positions. And as a result, I have to give Force India, for what they're capable of doing and what they do actually end up doing, I'll give them a C+. Paul di Resta, as I said, from the same sort of fan. I think his cousin is Dario Franchitti, so the talent is there, the desire is there, the fire is there, and he gives all he's got, and the car just will not let him get through. He's always fighting to join Q3, qualifying 3 for the top 10 shootout, and he's just not getting there because of the car. It's not good enough. It should be, as I say. His team's been in F1 since 2008. He should be brilliant, Paul di Resta. If the car was better, he could have even won a race by now, I reckon. But what do you say about a driver that gives his all and his all isn't good enough because the car isn't good enough? What do you say about that? I don't know. So for Paul, he should be getting consistent points finishes, but you know, sometimes he's getting 11ths and 12ths, just outside the points. And for a driver with that much fire and ability, it's not good enough. Yes, his car isn't what it could be, but you do have to question the strategies of Force India. They do try and stay out of the pits more often than not. So like, if the race is a 3-stop strategy or a 2-stop strategy, they'll go 1 stop less, and that hurts the potential race performance of the car. If they did strategies the same as everyone else, they'd be scoring more consistently. And that's not obviously down just to Paul, it's down to his race engineer, it's down to the team, it's down to the strategist, and obviously the technical director. So, be it his problem, be it the problem with the car or whatever, I will give Paul di Resta the same grade as his team, C+. Nico Hulkenberg now, and the German who was test driver last year for Force India, still sort of living off the pole position he got in Brazil in 2010 for Williams. At the time, Williams were god awful, and he got the pole, and high praises came his way. He's a talented driver, like his teammate Young and Hungry. But Young and Hungry can only get you so far. Like for Paul, the car needs to be just zenith better, so to speak, for them to get the consistent points scoring results. At times he's been outpacing, out qualifying, out racing his teammate, getting the odd 8th place finish, the odd 10th or 9th place finish. He's not really getting anything higher, and unfortunately, you know, because of the car, because of other drivers doing a little bit better, he's not getting the points finishes that the team need to combat Williams in the constructors. So it's the thing with Hulkenberg, that is he better than di Resta? That's the big question. They're very, very similar in terms of talent, I do believe. Paul di Resta, yes, he's got that sort of Scottish-Italian oomph to him, and I think he's just a couple of points ahead of Hulkenberg there. Can Hulkenberg win a race? Not in the car he's driving now. It might be an outside bet for the Ferrari number 2 job, just like the Resta is, or the Mercedes number 2 job. But we need to see the team step up if Hulkenberg's going to step up. So, like his teammate and the team, no, I'll say he's half a grade better. So I will go B- for Hulkenberg. Not because he's better than Paul di Resta, because he's getting better results than Paul di Resta. This one's taking longer than I expected, but if you're staying with me, thank you very much. On to the Sauber team now, and for a team that quite frankly thought its future was secure when BMW bought them in 2006, this is a team that are quite frankly still recovering from being brought back from the F1 brink by its owner. Peter Sauber is a legend in Formula 1. Just a couple of victories. I think it's just one victory actually, even with the BMW power help. And, you know, they've now got back their reputation as a young career builder in terms of team and in terms of drivers. They now have what they had in the olden days. They've got the Ferrari engine support, and the Ferrari engine has been awesome the last 10 years. The Saubers, you know, they came back in 2010. They weren't that competitive. 2011 they started to come back, but this year Sauber have been brilliant. And if luck had gone their way, they would have had a race win this year with Sergio Perez at Malaysia. Like Force India, they got 2 young, hungry drivers. One of them, Kamui Kobayashi, loves overtaking. Doesn't like being overtaken, which is brilliant for the sport. It's brilliant to see a driver attack other drivers on the grid. It's just fantastic to see that. And he's Japanese. I would have to say already the best Japanese driver in the history of F1. But I'll come back to that in a moment. As for the team, a huge sponsorship deal, with Chelsea, the football club, helps them cement their future. It's almost a sad sight to see that on the side of a car, a logo of another sports team, but it's helping them. Whether or not Sauber gets bought out by Chelsea, which is a strange thought. I mean, the Chelsea F1 team doesn't sound right, but it could happen. But this is a team that is growing. The technical director, I do believe, is the first female technical director in F1. She knows what she's doing. She's been trained by one of the best, Peter Sauber. And you just have to see that this team in the future, give it, say, 2 or 3 more seasons, they could be challenging for the championship. They are improving that much this year. They have the most improved team, apart from Lotus. The car is miles better than it was last year. It's eons better than it was in 2010. You know, they're coming back. The Saubers are consistently scoring decent points. It's only a couple of races where they failed to score, I think. And the team as a whole is better than Force India. I actually think Sauber are better than Mercedes. I just feel that way. I think that is the case. So, what do I say? Well, they're better than Force India. They're better than Mercedes. I personally think they've had a better season. Consistent points finishes. If you get consistent points finishes, you're going to get higher grade from me personally. So, offhand, it's been about 30 minutes since I gave the grade for Mercedes, so I apologise if it's lower or higher, but I will give Sauber a B+ for their season so far. And we'll go on to the drivers. Kamui Kobayashi is quite frankly one of the most exciting talents in Formula 1, apart from his teammate, which is rather scary for him. Great at passing, doesn't like being passed, as I say. Loves taking on other drivers, even if he doesn't get positions. And it's great for the crowds, it's great for the sport. And, for his season, because I've basically said all I need to say about him in the previous Sauber section, for his season, I will have to give him probably a B, because he's been outshone by Perez. And to be outshone by your younger teammate, although I think they're more or less the same age, no number one driver wants that out of a number two driver. Not a single one of them. On to the Mexican marvel. Trying to think of a word with him there. On to the Mexican marvel, Sergio Perez. It's been said before by me on this particular channel that when David Coulthard was involved in a horrific air crash that he walked away from, basically unharmed, that the following season in F1 was 2001 and he finished runner-up in the championship. It's as if you lose the fear and you get better somehow at what you do. And same can be said for Sergio Perez. Last year at Monaco, he crashed into the barriers after the tunnel, just past the chicane. And he was out for the next couple of Grand Prix. And when he came back, it took him a few races to get, used to it again and coming back and doing all sorts of things. Then he came back this year and immediately there was an improvement. He was already better than Kobayashi by, say, round 2. If he didn't go wide at one of the corners at Malaysia, Sauber would have won the Malaysian Grand Prix, not Fernando Alonso. He would have won the Grand Prix. It would have been probably the most popular win of the last 3 or 4 seasons. He would have won that race. Instead, he finished second to Alonso that day. But the talent is there. The guy is... I will say this now. Sergio Perez is the most exciting prospect in Formula 1. He's better than Kobayashi. I wouldn't say by miles, but he is definitely better than Kobayashi. He is better than Nico Hülkenberg. He is better than Paul di Resta. He is better than Romain Grosjean. If Sergio Perez was driving a Lotus, Lotus would have won a Grand Prix by now. If Sergio Perez was driving a Mercedes, however, I still think Mercedes would be, sort of iffy in the reliability department. But if Perez was driving a better car, he would be in the running for the championship. He is that darn good. He hasn't won a race. He's unlucky, not to have won a race this year. Yes, okay, there's been a couple of races where he hasn't finished in the points. But the overall consensus is that Sergio Perez is favourite to replace Felipe Massa at Ferrari for 2013. If it happens, it happens. Like I keep on saying, Massa's replacement will be a 1-year deal. What would be ideal for Massa's replacement for 2013 is to get in for 2013 with a sort of contract penciled in thing to return to Sauber for 2014 until he's eligible to go back to Ferrari. I will say this now, and write a comment in the comment box or message me and the email, the show. And I will say this now, that Sergio Perez is a future world champion. Obviously he won't do it this season, and obviously he probably won't do it next season, but he is a future world champion. I will say that right now. You heard it here first on F1 Talk. As for my grade for this season so far, Sergio Perez, for me, gets a B-. If I gave Kobayashi a B, my memory's terrible. If I did give him, I'll give him a B+, actually. I'll scratch that B-, I will give him a B+. He could have won, which probably would have given him an A-. He didn't, he gets a B+ from me. Onto the Scuderia Toro Rosso team, and we're almost done. Just a few more teams to go now. Not much to say. They made a big mistake, did Toro Rosso, for getting rid of their two long-term drivers, Sebastian Buemi of Switzerland and Jaime Alguersuari of Spain. Both of them had been at Toro Rosso for about a season and a half, obviously more for Buemi, and Alguersuari was just beginning to get good. He was scoring points consistently alright. They might have been an 8th place here, a 7th place there, but he did get a couple of 6th place finishes. I believe he might have even got a 5th place finish last year. Had they stuck with those drivers, they would be doing a darn sight better than they are now. The Toro Rosso program is basically a feeder team to their big sisters, Red Bull Racing. Hence, Toro Rosso is Italian for Red Bull. Which is fair enough. We are talking about a team now that basically gives young drivers to the old team. Which is fair enough. That's what they're in F1 for. But they made the mistake of getting rid of those two drivers. As I say, Alguersuari was improving by the race, and he was shocked when he found out he wasn't getting a contract extension for this season, to be replaced by the Australian Daniel Ricciardo and the Frenchman Jean-Eric Vergne. As a result, this has been a sort of a learning season for the team, learning with their new drivers, learning how they work, and learning how to adapt to their styles and bring things forward. As a result, they haven't had much success in scoring points. They've had a few 13th place finishes. A glimmer of hope from both drivers, really. I think both of them have scored a 8th place finish this season. Apart from that, they've been pretty down disappointing compared to the last couple of seasons. As I say, Alguersuari was scoring points consistently. He should still be in F1 with Toro Rosso, in my opinion. For the mistake they made getting rid of those two elder drivers, I wouldn't say, because Alguersuari is like 21, 22, maybe 23, for making that error and not sticking with consistency. I've got to give Toro Rosso as a team a C- at least, because they made that error and they're paying for it, hook, line and sinker. As I say, onto their drivers now, and their first choice driver is Daniel Ricciardo of Australia. And no discredit to Ricciardo, but there's two drivers that were a darn sight better than him. And, I think he scored an 8th place finish or a 9th place finish. And that's about it. He doesn't hold drivers up. He's just not been in F1 long enough. He had a half a season with HRT last year. And what can you learn at a team that's that new? Hardly anything. So this, in my opinion, is his first season in F1. So can you tell me that he deserves not to be graded? He does deserve to be graded. He's not good enough yet. And as a result of that, I'll give him a D, because he's not good enough. On to his teammate now, the Frenchman Jean-Eric Vergne. what do you say about Jean-Eric Vergne? Started off pretty well in Australia. It's been sort of like steady to downhill in terms of the season so far. If you're talking the line that I was talking in a line graph, you'll see a sort of steady curve downwards. We've not had a decent French driver since Alain Prost. Yes, Olivier Panis won the 96 Monaco Grand Prix in extraordinary circumstances. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have lasted in F1 as long as he did. But this Frenchman's not going to win a race, I don't think, in F1. I don't actually think he's going to stay in the team much longer. He might stay for the majority. Excuse me. I think Jean-Eric Vergne will stay in Formula 1 for the remainder of this season and possibly the beginning of next season. But like Sebastien Bourdais a couple of seasons ago, he's going to get kicked out. Ricciardo is better than him, but only just. Like his teammate, I'll give him a D. The team made a mistake by bringing him in. They should have kept Alguersuari and/or Buemi. They messed up and they're paying for it with the inconsistency of both these drivers. Just 4 more teams to go, and the first of those is one of the longest serving in Formula 1, and they are the Williams F1 team. After a horrible, quite frankly horrible 2011, it was, I wouldn't say all change at Williams. Sam Michael left the technical department. He's joined McLaren. But Williams is now fully backed. I wouldn't say fully backed, but they are backed by the Venezuelan government because of their number one driver, Pastor Maldonado. I'll come back to him in a few moments' time. They decided not to give Rubens Barrichello his 20th season in Formula 1. And as a result, we said goodbye to Rubens. I was a bit upset about that, but his seat was taken by compatriot Bruno Senna, nephew of the late, great Ayrton Senna. And a mixture of feelings about Williams. If it wasn't for Maldonado's actions, they'd be scoring more points. Senna is becoming their consistent points finisher because of Maldonado's actions, as I say. The team is a darn sight better than it was last year, or the results they're having are a darn sight better. They got a race win, their first race win since Brazil 2004 with Montoya, but they need both drivers to score consistently, and at the moment that's not going to happen. Williams, as a result, much improved since last year, their worst season ever. Much improved, as I say. I will give Williams a. Oh, let's think about this now. I will give Williams a B- because they have improved that much. They've pulled their socks up. They've got drivers that can deliver results. Pastor Maldonado won in Spain, for heaven's sake. He's done nothing since, but he's won a race. Bruno is learning what it's like to be in a proper Formula 1 team. He drove for HRT in their first season when they knew nothing about the sport. And, you know, Bruno's getting there. He's getting there. He's becoming the better driver than Maldonado. Maldonado has raw talent, there's no doubt about that. He got the pole position in Spain thanks to a penalty. He won in Spain. Brilliant race. But he's got to continue being that guy if he's going to get Williams the points. On to the Venezuelan driver. And, as I've said, he won in Spain. Fantastic performance from beginning to end. He was fast in practice, consistently qualifying. He got the pole position thanks to a penalty. He won in Spain, fantastic result, really popular win because Williams, as like I say, hadn't won since 2004. It's 8 years, you know. But since then, I don't know what's happened to him. It's like Jekyll and Hyde, you know. We're seeing flashes of madness, not flashes of brilliance, flashes of madness from this guy. He's punting drivers off the road. He knocked Lewis Hamilton out of the race when Hamilton was like 3rd or 4th. He knocked Hamilton out of the race and into the barriers. This guy is driving like most drivers would if it was a video game. It's like, get out of my bloody way, you know. He's shunting drivers off the road, and it's not just him. It's not just Lewis Hamilton. It's Sergio Perez. It's who else got put out by him? I think it was Paul. Yes, it was Paul di Resta. And this guy is, yeah, he's good, but he knows it. You know, he's not adhering to the rules, and more often than not, he's getting pulled into the pits for a drive-through penalty or a stop-go penalty, and he doesn't seem to be learning his lesson. And he's a danger to all the other 23 cars on the track, including his teammate. He won in Spain just as good as Nico Rosberg did in China. A brilliant win. And then he goes and commits race suicide, you know. It's a kamikaze. And in F1, you don't need a kamikaze. For the win, brilliant. High grades. For his qualifying performances, high grades. For his race performances and the red mist that appears in front of his face. I have to give Pastor Maldonado a B-. He is a good driver, but he needs to get rid of those so-called suicidal tendencies. And to his teammate Bruno Senna, and when your surname is Senna, you've got to live up to your reputation. And obviously at HRT couldn't. Obviously at Lotus Renault last season, I thought he had done enough to stay with the team, to be honest with you. And if he was with the team still, because I thought it was going to be Raikkonen and Senna this year at Lotus, but they didn't want to keep him on. He performed really well, I thought, in the last few races of last year. So he joined Williams, replacing Barrichello. You know, for that I was a little bit, oh, why? But he struggled a couple of races, including qualifying. I think it was at Britain, Silverstone. But since then he's performed consistently well. He's been scoring a darn sight more points than Maldonado. Yeah, Maldonado got 25 for the win. Maldonado in total, I think, he's got something like 29 points. And that's not good enough for a team that can do it this year. They can't win the championship, obviously, but they can get consistent points. And that's what Bruno Senna's getting for him now. He's maturing nicely. He's growing with the team. And, you know, within 2 or 3 races, he'll be team leader. If he's not already. I'd like to see what will happen if Maldonado shunts Senna off the way. You know, can Williams afford to get rid of Maldonado considering the money brought in by the Venezuelan government? But both of these drivers are in there because they got huge pay packets, so to speak. They're not exactly the best drivers on the grid, but they're bringing in the money to the team, and the money is what's needed by Williams at the moment. They are the biggest privately owned team in F1. But saying that, for Bruno, the talent, like Paul di Resta, like Nico Hülkenberg, like the two Saubers, is there. More talented than the Toro Rosso drivers, both of them. I think Maldonado is slightly better than him at present. It's just the mad moments of Maldonado. So I will say for Bruno, half a grade less. I'll give him a B. or a B minus, like the same as Maldonado. And we are getting there. 3 teams to go. And quite frankly, this should be relatively quick because the 3 new teams are the 3 new teams, or 3 newer teams. These 3 teams came into Formula 1 in 2010, and you could see from the get-go that one of them was, I wouldn't say light years ahead of the other 2, but definitely ahead of the other 2. They were known as Lotus Racing, or Lotus F1. They are now known as Caterham F1, and they're getting there. They promised improvements in performance. They have got improvements in performance. They've got Renault engines. What more can be said? Not a heck of a lot more, really. Tony Fernandez has brought this team out of the doldrums, so to speak. They finished higher than the other 2 teams in the Constructors' Championship, which basically means that they get X more money, and this X more money is, I would have to say, has brought them success, but not tons of it. Heikki Kovalainen, again, is the guy who's leading the charge. We finally say goodbye to another old timer in terms of Formula 1, Jarno Trulli, before the season started. And I've got to say it's making a difference, but not much of one. The team is still young. The team, I think a couple of races ago, Petrov was 11th. And he was about 2 or 3 seconds behind the guy in 10th, so they would have got their first point had they been more lucky or better management or whatever. But Kovalainen's been in session 2 a couple of times, like he was the previous season. And I remember the last time he got into Q2, they didn't send him out because there wasn't much point. He was like half a second slower than the car ahead of him going into session 2. So, you know, who was 16th? He was 17th, obviously. So it's a little bit more of the same as it is with Mercedes, but the progress is being made. The progress is there. They are moving forward. They just need a tiny bit more luck to get their first point. And once they get their first point, it'll be sort of like a Minardi first point of the season. I remember in 2002 when Mark Webber finished 5th in the Minardi. They had a podium celebration with the rest of the paddock buying them a bottle of champagne. It's like, yeah, they did it. And a similar thing will happen to Caterham. Caterham will get a point. Will score their first points. Whether it will happen this year, I doubt it. I would love them to score their first points. In fact, I would love it if they both drivers scored the first point in the same race. Just sort of like a 9th and a 10th. That'd be great. But somehow I don't think it's going to happen. You've got too many other teams consistently fighting for the points paying positions, 1st to 10th. And there's just not enough luck in the Caterham team at present. But for the slight improvements they've shown, I'll give them a C+. Heikki Kovalainen, as I've said, in Q2 a couple of times, but you know, more often than not finishing 12th, 13th, which isn't bad out of 24. It's not bad. It's not brilliant, but it's not bad. Can't really say a heck of a lot more about it. He's a likeable guy. The improvements are there. He's being egged on by his new teammate Vitaly Petrov, and things seem to be going quite well between the two of them. So their combined hunger, their combined desire, and the team's desire to score their first point is slightly putting pressure on the two of them. They've been in F1 now 2.5 years. Can they move up a level and get the first points on the board? Only time will tell. Like I say, I don't think they can this season. Next season, probably. Not this season. For Heikki, like the team, I'll give him a C+. Vitaly Petrov of Russia. Didn't know whether he was going to stay with Lotus or not for this season. Quite clearly he didn't. And he was sort of in the F1 wilderness. He probably would have got a test drive, but Caterham dumped Jarno Trulli in favour of Petrov. Wise move? I think so. Trulli last year was complaining about lack of power steering. No such complaints from Petrov this year. He's in a car with a familiar engine. He had Renault Power last year, did Petrov. He's got Renault Power this year, so he's used to the engine. But and he's getting there. He's getting there. I think it was Petrov who did finish 11th a couple of races back. I think it was Valencia, I'm not too sure. If anyone can correct me on that, please do so in the comment box. But pretty decent. Like his teammate, I'll give him a C+, because he can get there. Out of the two drivers, it looks like he will score the point before Heikki does. And that's unfortunate for Heikki, but we'll see. We'll see what goes on. On to the Hispania Racing team, the HRT team. And I have to say, apart from the non-qualification of the two cars in Australia, things are looking better for them. The team moved to Madrid as a whole. They now have a purposely built base in F1, and from that base they're beginning to improve the car. Alright, not to the standards of the Caterhams, but they're improving the car. And any improvements to a team that was rooted to the back of the grid the last 2 years is a welcome one. Any improvement for any team is welcome, which is obvious, but you have to take into consideration that this is a team who are extremely underfunded. In terms of money, they are now the second worst team in Formula 1 as to this time last year, but they were the worst team in Formula 1 in terms of money and things like that. I actually think they are better than their rivals Marussia. In terms of driver ability, you got Pedro Della Rosa, who was brought in. We said goodbye to Vitantonio Liuzzi with proper justification as well, I think. Liuzzi just wasn't giving anything to the team. Yes, he was assisting them with a sort of like car setup, chassis setup and things like that, but they've now got a driver that has been a test driver in the last 6 or 7 seasons, I think it is. Maybe even more than that. And it's showing, I think. Alright, there's not been tremendous improvements in terms of pace, in terms of ability, but I think in reliability they've improved tenfold. They've got strong cars. They didn't pass the crash test until about round 3 of the championship, I think, something like that. But they are getting there. They're getting there. They're not going to challenge Caterham for the team, first of the 3 new teams to score a point, but they are going to challenge. They're going to challenge themselves to improve. And in Formula 1, that's what any team's looking to do. For HRT, I'll give them a D+, because they're better equipped to deal with Formula 1 now, considering their move to the HQ in Madrid. And with a Spanish driver, with a Spanish team, they're getting better. If only their second driver was as good. On to their drivers now, with Pedro Della Rosa of Spain, obviously, with the Spanish team. Couldn't have come at a better time, I think. I think he's nearing the end of his F1 career in general. Easily a better test driver than he is a race driver. That was proved a couple of seasons ago at Sauber, where they brought him in, because he was a reliable performer, not necessarily the quickest driver in terms of pace, in terms of skill, but you have to get who you can. and Hispania wanted to go with experience, and they got him. And what driver from a country doesn't want to drive for a team that is their own nationality? Right, it would be better to get a drive with a Sauber or a Toro Rosso or a Force India or a Lotus or a Mercedes or any of the top teams. But failing that, you go for a team that you really want to drive for. And Pedro, after years of being stuck in the testing doldrums, someone offers you a race seat for a season, you take it, don't you? So he's advising the team as they wanted him to. After years of testing with McLaren, Williams, he's got into a team. He's sort of made it his own because he is Spanish after all. But the performances aren't there because the car performance isn't there. It hasn't been there. They still haven't got KERS, for heaven's sake. You're not going to get anywhere without all the goodies on the car. All of the abilities. So he's doing okay. He's not doing brilliant. He's doing a heck of a lot better than his teammate. But then again, his teammate is the worst driver in F1 history. And I'll get onto him in a moment. But as for Pedro, I can't say he's brilliant. I can't say he's horrendously bad. It's all up to the car. If the car was a darn sight better, he'd be a darn sight better. Pedro de la Rocha is a former point scorer in Formula 1. I think he's a former podium finisher with McLaren. So Pedro can do it if the technology is there. And as a result of that, I'll give him a D+. As I've just said, his teammate from India, Narain Karthikeyan, is the worst driver in Formula 1 history. And I don't need to say it again because I exaggerated how I said it then. This guy is in Formula 1 because he's got money. Brought into Formula 1 in Jordan in 2005, and I think he didn't even finish that season. HRT brought him in last year, realised that he wasn't up to scratch, took him out of the team, replaced him with Daniel Ricciardo, who's now at Toro Rosso. Karthikeyan, he came back for the Indian Grand Prix last year. They brought him in again. He's driven full time this year, and I think he's driving full time because of a clause in his contract that says HRT won't get all the sponsorship money from his sponsor unless he drives the full season or something like that. It's probably wrong, that assumption, but it's what I've got to assume, because if I was a team principal and I had a choice of drivers, Narain Karthikeyan would probably be at the bottom of my list. He's consistently a second to a second and a half plus behind his teammate in qualifying. Timo Glock of Marussia is easily better than him, and given the choice between the two, I'd pick Glock 100% of the time ahead of Karthikeyan. Karthikeyan cannot race in Formula 1. He's not good enough. I don't even think he's good enough for GP2, to be honest with you. But that's my opinion. You got yours. If you know any better, comment the show, email the show, whatever. I'll give him... what can I give Narain Karthikeyan? E+. No, in fact, I'll give him an E. He's not even worth the plus. He's that bad. On to the final team, and I hear most of you saying, "Yeah," but I'll finish it off. I've talked about other teams in detail, so I'll continue on here. And the Marussia team, well, what could be said about Marussia? Marussia are the worst team in Formula 1, full stop. And I mean that every step of the way. I feel sorry for Timo Glock, who would probably still be driving for Toyota if Toyota hadn't quit Formula 1 at the end of 2009. Who found refuge at Formula 1's one of the youngest one of the youngest F1 teams, is what I was trying to say there. And quite frankly, he's not going to be able to go anywhere else. Maybe HRT if they want him, but I can't see that happening with the sponsorship money that's being brought in by Karthikeyan. So he's stuck at Marussia for the rest of his F1 career. Like Pedro Della Rosa, like Jarno Trulli when he was at Lotus, now Caterham, he's just there to guide the team through the first tentative years. Whether or not he can stay in Formula 1, I think he'll stay for one more season after this, because you've got to be, as a driver, disheartened by the fact that your team is not good enough, and they're consistently at the back of the grid, they're consistently on the rear of the grid. I'm talking the final two positions. HRT have moved ahead of them in terms of performance and consistency, and they're just not going anywhere. Marussia, yes, they've changed the name from Virgin. The Russian sponsors have come in, or the Russian owners have come in. They bought the team. They're doing better in terms of money, but they're still the worst equipped team in Formula 1 in terms of money and or performance. So what can you draw from Marussia's performance? Back of the grid, yes. Newest driver in Formula 1, yes. Charles Pic, his teammate. Young drivers are in Formula 1 because they pay for the seats. I have no doubt that's probably what Charles Pic had to do to get into Formula 1. He won't be in F1 much longer. Marussia are the new Minardi team. And, I would have said that about HRT a couple of seasons ago. Not anymore. HRT are sort of like the new, if I had to pick the new Tyrrell team. They're not good enough, but they could be. And that's sad for a team like Tyrrell that won World Championships. But Marussia are not good enough. So as a team, like Karthikeyan, I'll give them an E, because they're not worth an E+. Timo Glock, what can you do? I feel sorry for the guy. His career went down the toilet as soon as Toyota's time in F1 was over. What can you do with a team that can't push you forward? Glock cannot be helped. So we'll just have to see what happens with his future. I can't necessarily give Glock the same bad grade that I gave Marussia, because this is an occasion where the team is worse than the driver. The driver is better than the team. So Glock will get a D, because he can't get anything else out of the car. On to the final driver and the final part of this video. It's Charles Pic of France, and quite frankly he's in the team because he paid to be in the team. Has done nothing all season. Might have finished ahead of Karthikeyan a couple of times, but in terms of F1 achievements, that's like the easiest one to get. As an F1 driver, you have to beat your teammate, and he might have done that a couple of times as well, but more often than not, Charles Pic is 24 out of 24 each race, if 24 drivers finish the race. And that's about all I can say for him, really. He's in a team that can't sort of nurture him to better standards in F1 in terms of results. He can't do that because the team can't. So I'll give him a E+ because of the fact he cannot improve until the team do. So that's basically it for this edition of F1 Talk. I can hear a lot of you wondering why it nearly took me an hour and 45 to actually go through all of this, but I just wanted to give you my thoughts on the halfway season, and just on the season in general, not any of the drivers. We've had more winners this year than any other year in Formula 1, but I think we've had our fill of winners. I would love Lotus to win a race in the next 9 races, but can I see it happening realistically? Probably not. as I said about an hour ago, Raikkonen has the best shot of winning Lotus for Lotus, and his best shot will come in the next Grand Prix at Spa. So I thank you for watching, as you do each and every time. I apologise for the length of this one, but I did say at the beginning of the video, I hope you're comfortable. And, you know, 2 hours is a long time, nearly 2 hours is a long time to sit down and listen to someone blabber on about something. I'm passionate about Formula 1. You wouldn't be watching this video if you're not passionate about Formula 1. So thank you for watching. I'll see you next time for more F1 talk and the preview of the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. Thanks for watching.